Welcome to Parev-TV. Once again, we are very excited to be connected by an Armenian intellectual, an Armeniologist, a teacher, a translator, a journalist, and for the past year, the executive director of the Armenian Prelacy in New York. His name is Dr. Vartan Matiossian. I have known him for quite a few years. I've respected him tremendously, do respect him. And I'm really, really excited with today's interview because there are so many questions I have for him, and we'll see where this goes. We will also be injecting some Armenian in this interview, so we hope you will enjoy it and find it most rewarding. Dr. Vartan Grigorian, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. You were born in Montevideo, Uruguay. And if you can just give us an idea, where did your parents come from before they settled in Uruguay? And just a brief idea of your background.
Good morning, Vartan, and thank you, first of all, for this opportunity, for this conversation, which I hope it will be pleasant for all viewers. My parents were born as children of survivors of the genocide, as everybody else, so to speak. My father was born in Beirut, and at a very early age, he moved to Montevideo. And the same with my mother, she was born in Athens, Greece, and she also moved to South America, first to Brazil and then to Uruguay, after World War II. So they met in Montevideo. They were both from early age in South America, and they met in Montevideo, where they formed the family, and my sister and I were born.
You know, in 1965, to be more exact, on April the 20th, 1965, and honestly, I did not think it was that long ago, Uruguay was the first nation to officially recognize the Armenian Genocide. That was a year after you were born. I don't know if you brought the good tidings to Uruguay or what happened then, but what is the significance and how come did Uruguay turn to be the first nation to recognize the Armenian Genocide? What is it we're missing as we talk about or learn about South America?
In the case of Uruguay, usually, I mean, it's often overlooked because people don't know about that or know very little, that there was a tremendous movement starting from the youth, the Armenian youth in Uruguay, around the end of 1963, beginning of 1964, which first led to a huge public demonstration of April 24, 1964, about 10,000 people, which was unheard of in the diaspora at that time. Remember that we started going public, so to speak, in 1965. This was one, and I have to mention this. This was a united movement from the youth. For those who are not, or who think about Armenian stuff looking from the lenses of today, 50 years ago, or more, almost 55 years ago, it was very hard to overcome all political and social differences in communities, big or small. And we all know what we are talking about. Especially in a small community like Montevideo, we've had and still has its own share of political problems. Young people from all sides of the community came together, they formed that committee, they started this movement, first leading to 64, and then to also the huge demonstration of 65, and in the meantime, they also managed to get through this law in the Uruguayan parliament. which was not just a resolution, it was a law for that year. It is a law that was passed by both chambers in February and April. On April 6, on April 20, actually, the Senate passed the law, and on April 22, 1965, it became law when it was published in the official ballot. So the significance of this is that it recognized April 24, 1965 as a day to commemorate April 24. On the other hand, the significance is that it recognized the genocide without using the word genocide in the law. The law itself doesn't mention genocide. There is no mention to genocide. It only speaks of Armenians assassinated or murdered, as you want to do the translation. The word is asesinados in Spanish. In 1915, there is no mention either of genocide or who perpetrated or where perpetrated this assassination. And the genocide is mentioned in the exposition of motives of the law. I mean, in the explanation why the law is being passed, but it's not in the law itself.
Was later on the word genocide used, or is it still not used in the resolution?
You know, this law was only for 1965 because it made an official recognition that Uruguay state would also, for instance, allow Armenian employees to be absent that day to participate in commemoration and other things. And on the other hand, afterwards, in 2000, actually 2004, from 2000 to 2004, the two chambers passed another law making this commemoration extensive for all April 24. But again, that law practically copied the text of the law of 1965, and again didn't use the word genocide in the text. This got some complaints, etc. But so far, for the past 40, 50 years, we always say that Uruguay was the first country that recognized the genocide, but ironically, without using the word genocide. And this is interesting because, you know, here in the United States, everybody knows that we have been pushing and pushing and pushing for the use of the word genocide to be satisfied with recognition from the United States. But on the other hand, we are all satisfied that Uruguay did that recognition without the word. So it is a very interesting paradox.
You know,
I leave it there.
Yeah. Throughout the world, we are pushing and pushing and pushing. Are we pushing in the right direction?
I think that yes and no. Yes, because of course, genocide, the matter of the recognition of the genocide is a great deal for us, and not only for us, but for anyone who is concerned with justice and human rights. But if the recognition of the genocide is just a means in itself, I would say that no, that we are not pushing in the right direction. I mean, where we should push, I am not a politician, so I'm not going to make a comment on that, but I don't think that the recognition of genocide should be a goal in itself, but something that is part of a plan or a process.
Dr. Matiossian, I'll call you Vartan from here on. You, at a very young age, you moved from Montevideo to Buenos Aires. And I know from the little I've read, we have a very well-established Armenian community in Buenos Aires. How well-established was it that gave you this Armenian education, the Armenian background? Or where is it that you got the Armenian background? or interest in Armeniology?
Of course, even though my early years in Montevideo gave me the basic foundation, but it was in 1973 when I moved to Buenos Aires went to Armenian school, and I finished Armenian primary and secondary school in Buenos Aires. This is where I acquired definitely a structured Armenian education, and my interest in Armenology started. The secret of that is that the community had from very early age, from the late 1920s, they had already Armenian daily schools only for Armenian subjects, like our Saturday schools here, but every day.
Every day.
Those schools, they were even up to 15 at some point in Buenos Aires and Cordoba. Of course, that number didn't remain the same. But by the 1950s, these schools, actually there was one school that was founded from the scratch, which was the Mexitai school, which was the first one that integrated the Armenian and Argentinian programs, meaning that instead of the children going, let's say, in the morning to Armenian school and in the afternoon to public school or private school to learn, you know, the Argentinian official programs, they had everything in one school, in one place. This the first school was that did that was the Mexitai school. Then other schools which already existed did the same. They also integrated the Argentinian school, and by the late 1960s, all of them had become, you know, one school where you went from the morning to the early afternoon, and you had everything in one place. So this is I went there to school, which was Armenian school. I went there to one school that had that kind of program.
Interesting. Speaking about South America, I don't know if I'm right, but it seems more and more South America is coming on the radar of humanity. The Pope, Roman Catholic Church, the Pope Francis, right?
Yeah.
The Pope Francis was born in Buenos Aires, or close in Argentina. Very lately, maybe over the past year, the Armenian Assembly, the Armenian National Institute, launched a website only in Spanish. I'm sure you know, you're aware of these. I have here a magazine. I had it here a few seconds ago, and I would like to show it to you. This is
I got it.
HBU Monthly. I'm sure you got it. It says the Latin American Armenian. What is it that suddenly South America is on the map? Or what do you think is the trend? What is the role it will play in the future?
Well, the world is becoming a smaller and smaller place. And even if, let's say, South American Armenians were a kind of exotic creatures, so to speak, in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. And South America was, in our imagination, the place to go to, you know, for assimilation of the diaspora. This is something that it has been written once and again in newspapers, books, and essays by people who visited or didn't visit South America. That trend sort of changed, or at least it has not been that much noticeable in the past few years. Because in the end, the Armenians in South America, which are basically fourth generation, have functioned as a kind of laboratory of the diaspora with the good and the bad parts of it, and in a sense they might be watched as what it may happen to the rest of the diaspora on the long term if they continue this trend. I mean, not everything that's happened in South America, and especially Argentina, Uruguay, which are the two communities I know closest, is not that good. Not everything is good. Let's say, for instance, the loss of language is a very noticeable event over there. But I definitely believe that much more could have been done in the past to avoid the situation in the present. So this is stuff from which the diaspora itself could learn. And on the other hand, the resilience of Armenians in South America, their amazing activity, as you well said, you know, starting from 1965, when everybody was still kind of asleep at the helm regarding the genocide, or just starting, they had already got, you know, a country recognized. So this kind of activity has been noticeable in the past 50 years, and people outside the region have finally started taking good note of it in the past 20 and 30 years, I believe.
You know, I think I told you when I contacted you earlier this week that there was your interview in the Ararat. This was some 30 years ago. Yeah, I accidentally came across this article, and it was an interview with Varush Bogarian. I'm sure you know him. But there was also another gentleman by the name of Pascual Ohanian. I think he was a lawyer. And
yes, he was a lawyer and historian who wrote a 6-volume study.
Oh my God.
6-volume study in Spanish, up to I believe maybe 3,000 pages. It was published about the Armenian question and international relations from 1839 to 1920.
Okay.
He passed away last year.
Last year, God bless him. But Pascual Ohanian spoke about you, and he said Vartan Matiossian seems to be made of fire.
Well, I was a young person in 1990.
Very young. Here you are, very young.
Yeah,
very good. But you know, where do you get this fire to move ahead? It's not so easy, as you said. We have problems all over the world. Armenians in the diaspora. What brings out this fire in you?
I believe it's at some point I discovered that I was Armenian, and I had an interest in not just saying I was Armenian, but finding out why I was, and finding out how much information I could about why I was, and why not only my present was relevant, but how I had come to that present, which means that I need to know, or I had a quench. I needed to actually a thirst for anything regarding my past, my being not my said in a collective sense. So this is what led me to study the past, and also to be an observer of the present. And I think I have kept that, and I have developed that quite a quote-unquote fire for all things that pertain to Armenians, and trying to contextualize them within, the general knowledge. And I have tried to do that for the past 30 something years. And one more thing that I would like to highlight is that my interest in the past was not moved by the genocide itself. And I have to say, I started studying the Armenian past for all subjects outside the genocide. Until, of course, I came to a certain point where that also factored into the equation. But genocide has never remained being, you know, the center of my life or the center of my operation or even the center of my identity. I cannot live being with the idea of genocide 24/7 in my mind. I believe that someone should be more creative than that and overcome that kind of. I mean, the trauma is there, but it doesn't mean that you have to live with the trauma. It doesn't mean that you have to be defeated by the trauma.
You know, you say you are an observant of the present, and for many people, the present is the past 30 years of Armenian history with the newborn Republic of Armenia. For some others, maybe my generation, the history begins 1915 when my grandparents had to flee wherever. But in your case, it goes back 4,000 years to get a comprehensive view of the history and the culture of Armenians. How do you react when you see a new generation, and we speak about the millennium, the Y generation, the X generation, or some people's history in their mind, their Armenian history is maybe what happened yesterday only. How do you interpret, how do you react to the present where we are bombarded with outside influence, which we did not have when you were growing up?
This generation situation in the past, let's say 20 years, is very different from what we have encountered in the rest of our lives. And it's very hard to make good sense of it, because in the end you start realizing that you are talking kind of different language, and your perception or the way you were when you were their age is very different. But of course, we are always remember that the phrase by Socrates that, you know, each generation tended to condemn the previous generation or the young generation as you know, being people who were indifferent, who didn't do this or who didn't do that, etc., etc. But on the other hand, when you look around you and going outside the Armenian realm for a second, you look around what is going on in the United States these days, and you see the amazing participation of young people in these movements. You notice that there is something. I mean, that there is no reason to quote unquote desperate and think that, you know, these young boys or young girls are hopeless or stuff like that. On the contrary, they have a different perception of what is going on, and at some point, anybody who is interested in returning to the Armenian subject, anybody who is interested in Armenian issues, at one point it will come across a boulder, a rock, that will remind him, okay, there is no way to go past this rock if you first don't learn how to pass. And to pass that rock, you will need to learn your past. Something from your past will help you to go past that obstacle. And this is where anybody who is not at this moment caring about that past, we need to go back. Of course, not necessarily as a historian or a student of the past, but at least to learn something about what happened before yesterday or before 1991 or before 1950. That's my belief. That's the only way. I mean, that's the main way to get a comprehensive idea about your past, about your present.
You know, your interview in 1990 was pretty long, and you said a lot of interesting things, and quite a few things are being repeated, and new ideas are coming out. But my favorite quote from one of the Armenia's great writers is Gostan Zarian, when he said, "Every thinking Armenian is like a radio station in the middle of a storm, sending messages to distant places and receiving no reply. A horrible silence surrounds the thinking Armenian." You are definitely a thinking Armenian. How do you react to that silence that surrounds you at times?
Silence may be there, and of course it is. I mean, Gostan Zayan's quote, even if written in 1925, 24, it maintains its, its currency. And at some points, I say, okay, whatever I write or I say may fall in deaf ears, but at some point, someone will listen, someone will react, someone will go along with my thoughts or not, and they will spark some kind of interest. So I continue or persevere in my endeavors because, first of all, they are my endeavors, and I believe in what I am doing. And second of all, I write or I talk regardless of I am being heard or not. You never know what may happen, and that's not a reason to say, okay, I'm finished with all this and I am fed up. I have persevered for so long that I see no reason to say or to put an end to what I am doing, because it's part of my own self. I would be betraying my own self if today I said, okay, this is it. I am going to, to sit down and say nothing else.